All right, today's lesson title is Common Grammar Errors, and this is it's not really punctuation errors so much as sentence errors in the way that like a sentence is constructed, and it'll cover these three topics: a run-on sentence, a comma splice, and a fused sentence. If you are a fluent writer and you don't make these errors, this video isn't going to be super helpful, but it will show you more about these three concepts. Perhaps you write fluently and you don't make these errors, but it's also good to put a name to them. So there are some prerequisite concepts, though, to today's lesson. Pre-req meaning pre-required. So we have to understand the difference between an independent clause versus a dependent clause. If you're not comfortable with those concepts, pause, look those up, get a couple examples in your head, and then go from there. In a really short snapshot, independent is a full sentence, standalone, like a subject and a verb, and a dependent clause is an incomplete sentence, so it's a phrase. Okay, often starts with like which or because or a conjunction like and, but, or. Okay, so those are our prerequisite concepts: it's independent versus dependent clause. All right, so let's talk about run-on first. So the following example is a run-on sentence. It is cold outside. I think I'll get my coat. That will help. Okay, so this one right here, actually we'll delete this third independent clause here. Okay, this one right here is a run-on sentence, or it could be also a comma splice. There's an error in this sentence because it's a independent clause, so it is cold outside as a full sentence, followed by another independent clause. I think I'll get my coat. So independent clause plus a comma plus an independent clause is a run-on sentence or a comma splice, which is a grammatical error. Okay, there are a couple different ways to fix this or to correct this sentence, and I want you guys to do this in your notes so that you're kind of learning alongside instead of just watching it done for you. Okay, so a couple different ways to fix this error, which is again could be called a run-on sentence or or a comma splice. The first way to correct a fused or a comma splice is to add a conjunction. Okay, or to add or to replace the comma with punctuation, with an end punctuation, so that would be a period, or a semicolon also works, or an exclamation point. There we go. Okay, so you can really put it in punctuation, or actually the third way is a semicolon. Okay, so it is cold outside. I think I'll get my coat. The error again is that it's an independent clause, so full sentence next to a full sentence. I see this one. This is probably the most common error I see in student writing, hands down. And I think it's because, if you'll notice, Google Docs doesn't correct it. It's still an error. It's still a grammatical error, and programs like Grammarly will generally catch it, but Google Docs doesn't. And so it doesn't give you the option to autocorrect. But I see this one all the time, and it's an error. So one, we could add a conjunction between the comma and the next full sentence independent clause. We could add the word and, or even the word so would work. It's cold outside, so I think I'll get my coat. Okay, or you could use but or yet, but those don't really fit in the sentence. Okay, second way to correct, replace the comma with end punctuation, so you could just make it into two sentences. It's cold outside. I think I'll get my coat. Okay. Or a semicolon often works if you want to continue to keep the two ideas, like in your sentences, really close together. Like if you're analyzing a piece of literature and this this complete thought fits really closely with this complete thought, you might want to just throw in a semicolon. Or in a thesis statement, if you are describing maybe a three-pronged thesis statement. So let's go with an example thesis statement. Okay, hopefully you're comfortable with thesis statement. If not, maybe check out that lesson as well. But if you're writing a thesis statement for an essay, remember that's that like direction sentence that has the core of your arguments. And let's say your essay is on heroes. So heroes should be strong, sacrificial, and let's go with hopeful. Okay, and then let's say you are also asked a follow-up question in your prompt. A semicolon could help in a thesis because then you could continue on. You've got your 3 stems: strong, sacrificial, and hopeful. This helps society at large as opposed to just the individual. Okay, so it can be really helpful in a thesis statement if you are trying to fit a lot of thoughts into one sentence, but you just want it still in one sentence. Okay, so those are the 3 ways to fix a run-on, or it's also called a comma splice. Okay, let's move into fused sentence. So a fused sentence is a very similar error. It definitely feels like a run-on. This is a very common error, and I see this specifically with students in Access E, where a fused sentence will just, it kind of feels like it just continues on. Think of like how maybe a 3rd grader, maybe like 1st grader would tell a story. It just goes and then, and they go on and on and on, and it never stops, and you don't really know like what's happening. That's kind of like the error of a fused sentence. I think it's cold outside. I think I'll get my coat. That will help. So you're fitting lots of thoughts into the sentence, but it's not actually a sentence because there should be some natural breaks in that sentence. Okay, so you need to separate to fix a fused sentence. Separate the independent clauses. Okay, so here, go ahead and in the notes section, go ahead and do this with me. Find your independent clauses. So same thing as we kind of did last time. It is cold outside. Independent clause. I think I'll get my coat. Subject, verb, right? That will help. So you're finding your independent clauses, and then again, separating them by punctuation or those, this is a conjunction, right? Adding a conjunction, just like we did to fix the run-on and the comma splice. Okay, that's it. If you are curious about more about the punctuations tools of like the semicolon versus there's an emoji search. That's funny. If you're curious about the punctuation of the colon versus the semicolon, feel free to check out some resources on that because those are some handy punctuation tools. All right. Okay. Thank you.